you're seeking a relationship, my best advice might be to stop seeking and just be you. And I really do think that if you are looking for a romantic relationship, there's typically a reason and you're hoping to get something out of that. And I think it's really important to question why you feel like you need a romantic relationship and what lack are you feeling that you feel like you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I don't disagree with that at all. But on the other hand, I also know that when you are very much committed to your idea of yourself, and especially to the idea that your value can be measured, um, you'll often need validation from people outside of you. And so there really is a certain degree of toxicity that comes simply from you focusing on yourself, which means the needs that you perceive yourself to have, right? If you perceive yourself to need a partner, that perception is what's making your relationships toxic, more or less, right? Like, and I know this from plenty of people I've dealt with in coaching situations who have both went back to the toxic relationships and some who have moved on and actually, managed to find some degree of happiness and peace within themselves. I've heard this expression that the heart has needs that the head doesn't understand. And while that's lovely poetically, unfortunately, the heart's needs are based on your perception of yourself and your relationship with the world, right? So your emotional spectrum is going to change based on how much of a division you perceive, how much of a lack that you perceive based on that division. And so it's like the expression that a heart that's full in itself is very hard to break. Right? It's the heart that's not full in itself that's fragile, because it's requiring somebody else to fill it up. And if they don't, it cracks and it breaks. And so as long as you are feeling heartbroken, as long as you are feeling just buried by this sense that you're not good enough without that person's love, without that person's attention, or without another person to validate you, that's the problem that's going to make every relationship fall apart, because there is a certain degree of pressure that you're going to unwittingly put on the other person because of your need, because of your lack. And that person, if you're lucky and they're not the kind of person who wants to be needed, because that's often what happens when we're needy, we end up attracting the people who are looking for that. And then we end up getting taken advantage of as a result of our need and us blinding ourselves to the kind of person they are because they happen to appear like they fulfill those needs, right? If you're not lucky enough to find a person who isn't like that, then it's going to be very rough for you. But if you can find a person who isn't like that, then you can get into a relationship with them if they recognize that you're working through your need. It's not that you have to be completely free of your need to get into a relationship, but you have to recognize it. You have to just come to terms with it, because when you're arguing with your partner, if you are in a relationship and suddenly you're like, well, they're not living up to what I want them to do. That's you doing that. You need to look at that and look at why you have those expectations and what you're trying to fulfill within yourself. And in that moment, you'll have an insight about what it is you're doing and why, or about the person you're with and the fact that they're not where you're supposed to be or who you're supposed to be with. But you always have to be in that state of mind where you're aware that you're trying to fulfill yourself through someone else. Because as long as you're doing that, it will always be in danger. It will always be something that you're afraid of losing or that you need. And that's never as enjoyable as it appears conceptually, because in any relationship you've ever been in, if you need that person to pay attention to you and love you, you're never at peace. You're never truly happy, right? Unless they're fulfilling your expectations, which is again putting pressure on them. How long are they going to do that before they start resenting you, whether they realize it or not?